Good morning, Madam Secretary. Are you ready to proceed?
I am. Thank you. I'm sorry I'm late.
No worries. We'll then begin with agenda item number 2, public comment. Is there any member of the public present here in Carson City that would like to provide public comment to the board? I hear and see none. Is there anyone present in Las Vegas that would like to provide public comment to the board?
No, Governor, there is nobody here for public comment.
All right, thank you. And we'll move on to agenda item number 3, which is approval of the June 13, 2017 minutes. Have the members had an opportunity to review the minutes, and are there any changes? If there are none, the chair will accept a motion to approve.
I'll move for approval.
Secretary of State has moved to approve the minutes of June 13, 2017. Attorney General has seconded the motion. Any questions or discussion on the motion? I hear none. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Attorney General, did you vote aye?
Yes, aye. Sorry about that.
That's all right. Just want to make sure we have the record. That motion passes 3-0. We'll move on to agenda item number 4, which is state vehicle purchases. Mr. Wells, good morning.
Good morning, Governor. Item number 4 requests a single vehicle which was totaled in an accident. The funds for this vehicle are coming from risk management proceeds and from agency reserves, and the division has sufficient reserves to cover the request, and there are representatives from Fleet Services to answer any questions.
Okay. Mr. Wells, are you present? Good morning, sir. Oh, which? You hit your microphone. No, still not on.
There you go.
Good morning.
I should know how to do that by now. But good morning. For the record, Keith Wells, Fleet Services Administrator.
And Mr. Wells, good morning. I honestly don't have a question on this agenda item. I wanted to publicly recognize and thank you. It's come to my attention that you are retiring from state service after 30 years or so. And I just wanted to let you know that in my experience in dealing with you, I truly want to compliment you for what you've done and the great job that you've accomplished for the people of the state of Nevada, as well as for all our state workers. You know, I personally am going to miss you because I really have appreciated through the years the depth of your knowledge and your commitment to make it the best fleet service in the country. And if there's a better one, I'd like to see it. But again, I just wanted to publicly thank you for all that you've done.
I appreciate that, Governor. It's been a pleasure working for you and your team.
Thank you. And just said, I don't know what's next for you, but hopefully a lot of rest and vacations and going to exotic places and doing whatever it is you love to do in your personal time. But truly a thanks from me, and I'm sure I speak for the other members of the board and everyone throughout the state that has had the benefit of using the motor pool and all the different services that you provide.
Thank you.
Thank you. And hopefully there's a motion here for to approve the state vehicle purchase. Do we have a motion?
I'll move, Governor, to approve number 4. I believe we're on state vehicle purchases.
Yes.
Is that correct?
The Secretary of State has moved to approve the state vehicle purchase presented in agenda item number 4. Is there a second?
I second.
Attorney General seconds the motion. Any questions or discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. That motion passes 3-0. We will move on to agenda item number 5, which is approval to pay a cash settlement. Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Governor. Item 5 includes 2 requests for approval of cash settlements from the Department of Transportation relating to Project Neon. The first, in the amount of $2,888,000, will fully resolve an eminent domain action to acquire 1.735 acres of real property. The landowner has requested the state purchase all of the 5 parcels Due to the required destruction of all but one of the buildings, which would have to be redeveloped after completion of construction of Project Neon. The excess land will be used during construction, but likely disposed of at fair market value at the end of the project. Approval of this additional amount will bring the total settlement for this action to $5 million even. The second item, in the amount of $681,889, will fully resolve an eminent domain action to require 1.8024 acres of real property. Again, the landowner has requested the state purchase all of the 3 vacant parcels, even though not all of the land is required for the project. The excess land will be used during construction, but likely disposed of at fair market value at the end of the project. This property is also subject to a pre-condemnation claim with the former landowner that will not be resolved by this payment, but which should not impact this action. Approval of the additional settlement amount will bring the total to $865,000, and Director Malfabon and Mr. Gallagher are here to provide additional answers to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wells, and good morning, gentlemen. Yeah. Oh, Rudy.
There. Good morning. For the record, Rudy Malfabon, Director of Department of Transportation. As Director Wells indicated, this is related to 5 parcels associated with Project Neon that were owned by the O'Rourke family. We did an appraisal, and as was stated, we previously deposited what we felt was just compensation. The property owners were seeking on the O'Rourke parcels $7,775,000, but if they were to go to court, they were going to seek over $10 million in compensation. So we negotiated with the owner for this settlement of $5 million, which is for the total taking of the property, not just the portion that we needed for the project. And as Director Wells stated, we can sell the surplus property after the project is completed and have those funds back in the State Highway Fund from the surplus property sale. So we're requesting an additional $2,880,000 of new money to settle this matter. What occurred on this project, the design builder, Kiewit, proposed a design concept that eliminated a concrete retaining wall on these parcels. Now we can build a sloped embankment with the fill material and eliminate the need for the wall, which saves the state $450,000 in design and construction costs. So if the settlement is approved today, we also avoid the litigation costs of going to trial. And the family will retain a portion of the property for relocation of a billboard, but we view the settlement as a win-win for the state. With that, we're willing to answer any questions, Governor.
All right. Thank you, Director Malfabon. And is that $10 million, does that include their attorney's fees or anticipated attorney's fees?
For the record, Dennis Gallagher, yes, Governor, they would be seeking over $10 million, which, if they prevailed at the trial court, would include their costs and attorney's fees.
And the other part of this is that's just their side. If we were to take the case through trial, that doesn't, and possibly appeal, this doesn't include our costs and attorney's fees. And do you have an estimate of what those would be?
For the record, Dennis Gallagher. Through trial, the state's fees would probably be in the neighborhood of $75,000 to $100,000. We also feel that this case, because of potential legal issues, would more than likely be appealed by the losing party, and so we could double our cost if we went to the Nevada Supreme Court.
And just for the record, you do believe, both of you, that this settlement is in the best interest of the state?
Yes, Governor.
Yeah. No, and frankly, based on my review of the memorandum, this is another great outcome. And you know, we always try to balance. We have to be good shepherds of the taxpayers' money, but we also have to make sure that we fairly compensate those from whom we take property. And so I think this accomplishes that. So I want to compliment both of you for getting us to this place. Why don't we go ahead and go through the next one? Do any of the other board members have any questions on this first settlement?
Governor?
Yes.
No, Governor, thank you.
All right. Director Malfabon, if you would proceed with the second item, please.
Thank you. For the record, Rudy Malfabon, Director of NDOT. This Ad America Incorporated settlement is associated with property required for Project Neon. The previous landowner had filed an inverse condemnation and pre-condemnation claim against NDOT in 2014, alleging that our project caused the taking or damage to their property. Although the inverse claim was dismissed, the pre-condemnation issue still remains to be settled. We had deposited $183,111 with the court, which was our appraised value as of May 2014. We're requesting an additional $681,889 in new money to settle this for a total of $865,000. Ad America had defaulted on its loan with Clark County Credit Union, and the credit union foreclosed on the property in November 2016. We needed about 0.45 acres and a temporary construction easement during construction of the project. So we previously had offered $249,750. At the credit union's request, they are willing to accept $865,000 for all 3 parcels, which are approximately 1.8 acres. And this is approximately equivalent to the amount of NDOT's recent appraised value for what we were attempting to acquire. We can use the additional land during construction as a staging area, and after the project is completed, we'll have 1.355 acres that can be sold to recoup the additional costs. As I stated, Ad America will still have its pre-condemnation claim to be dealt with NDOT, but we believe that there's no merit to that, and we are seeking summary judgment on that issue. We're able to answer any questions from the board.
Thank you, Director Malfabon. And I had asked for this matter to be continued from last month because I had received some correspondence. So you're comfortable today in moving forward despite the contents of that correspondence?
Yes, Governor. As you saw in the correspondence, there was a letter from the previous landowner, Ad America, their attorney, and then the rebuttal correspondence from the credit union. So we believe it's in the best interests of the state and that everything is in order with this.
All right, thank you. And while you're here, Rudy, at least my observation is that Project Neon is on schedule and on budget. So do you have any comments in that regard?
Yes, Governor, it's going very well. If you drive by the project, you can see the amazing amount of property that was acquired right next to the existing I-15 freeway. So there's a lot of work still to be done, but they're progressing on schedule and on budget.
And then finally, in terms of property acquisition, will you bring me up to date where we are in terms of percentage-wise, how much of that property that we have acquired?
I know that we have right of entry on all of the property, so 100% of that. There's still some cases to be settled as far as to determine the compensation on a handful. And Mr. Gallagher might have some additional information on that.
For the record, Dennis Gallagher. As the director indicated, NDOT has occupancy for all the property it needs for Project Neon. There are probably somewhere between 6 and 10 cases remaining, but that's it. So from a legal perspective, we're also ahead of schedule and under budget too. So.
No, and you anticipated my next question, Mr. Gallagher, and I think it's a compliment to both of you and to your teams that have gone so far, because this is complicated, and the number of properties, I can't recall what it was, but do you remember off the top of your head, Mr. Gallagher?
Governor, if I recall correctly, it was just under 200.
Yeah, 200 different properties that we had to negotiate with to get this done. And as I said, we had a budget to work with in terms of resolving all those cases. And as you said, probably not a good idea to disclose how much money we have in there, depending with the people that are left, but well under what was anticipated in terms of what was budgeted to acquire those properties. And that's a yes?
Yes, Governor.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
That's correct, and we don't want to say how much is left in the pot.
Yeah, all right. Questions or comments from other board members with regard to agenda item number 5?
Governor, this is Barbara Sagasti. I just wanted to echo what your comments were and thank them, because I know this is a very tedious job and position, and thank them for their hard work, as you had indicated. I know this was not easy. So thank you, gentlemen, Director and Mr. Gallagher. Appreciate your efforts. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Madam Secretary.
All right, any other questions or comments? Hearing none, the chair will accept a motion to approve cash settlements as presented in agenda item number 5A in the amount of $2,888,000 and 5B in the amount of $681,889.
I'll move for
Move
approval.
to approve.
Attorney General has moved for approval. Madam Secretary, is that a second?
That's a second.
All right, the Secretary of State has seconded the motion. Any questions or discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 That motion passes 3-0. Thank you very much. Yeah. We'll move to agenda item number 6, which are salary adjustments. Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Governor. Sections 4, 5, 6, and 7 of Assembly Bill 489 from the 2015 legislative session appropriated salary adjustment dollar funds to the Board of Examiners to cover vacancy salary savings that were built into agency budgets, as well as the 1% and 2% cost of living adjustments that were effective on July 1st, 2015 and July 1st, 2016, respectively, which were not included in agencies' salary budgets. An agency whose actual salaries exceed the budgeted amounts due to the vacancy savings or the COLAs are allowed to request salary adjustment dollars from the Board of Examiners if they are funded with general fund or highway fund appropriations. This item requests access of those funds by the Office of the Governor to cover the cost of the COLAs in the amount of $34,726, the Department of Tourism and Cultural Affairs for the Museums and History Administration account to cover COLAs in the amount of $4,689, and the Department of Corrections is withdrawing their request for the $1.6 million and will bring back a revised amount to the August BOE meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. And for the record, on the governor's office, I did not get a COLA, so that has nothing to do with me. Questions or comments from any of the board members with regard to agenda item number 6?
None, Governor. Thanks.
Hearing none, the chair will accept a motion to approve the salary adjustments as presented in agenda item number 6.
So moved.
The Secretary of State has moved for approval. Is there a second? I was afraid of that. I heard a little click that we may have lost the Attorney General, so why don't we wait a moment to see if he reconnects. And Madam Secretary, for the purposes of the motion, it is only for 6A and B. As Mr. Wells indicated, the Department of Corrections has withdrawn its request under 6C. Mr. Attorney General, are you back with us?
I'm back. Sorry, Governor. Thanks.
Yeah. All right, so the Secretary of State has moved to approve the salary adjustments presented in agenda items 6A and B.
All right, second.
Attorney General has seconded the motion. Any questions or discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 3-0. We'll move on to agenda item number 7, approval to join or use other government's contracts.
Thank you, Governor. Item 7 includes 2 requests to join or use other government's contracts. NRS 332.195 allows the state to join or use contracts that are negotiated with other states or with local governments within or outside the state with the authorization of the contracting vendor. Statute provides that the original contracting government is not liable for any obligations incurred by the government who joins or uses the contract. These requests are similar to contracts but use the terms and conditions that are negotiated by the contracting government with the vendor, which may or may not be the same as the state's terms and conditions. These items will generally have a contract summary, it will a work order between the state of Nevada and the vendor, including the vendor's consent to allow the state to join the contract, the original contract and any amendments between the other government and the vendor, and justification to use the joinder process as opposed to a request for approval process, and why it is in the best interest of the state. The first request is from the Department of Administration Director's Office seeking to join a Clark County Master Services Agreement with Gartner, Inc. for services related to assessing and refining the implementation strategy and assisting with the development of the request for proposals for the software and integration vendors for the upcoming Enterprise Resource Planning System project to replace the state's financial and HR systems. The work order for this service would be $218,000 through August 31st, 2017. The second request is from the Department of Administration Purchasing Division seeking to join a State of Texas Department of Information Resources contract to provide an e-procurement solution to enhance the state of Nevada's procurement and purchasing business processes. The work order for this service would be $1,750,000 through April of 2020. And there are representatives from the Department of Administration to answer questions board members may have.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. I do have questions on both of these. And good morning.
Good morning, Governor, members of the board. For the record, my name is Leanne Easton, Deputy Director, Department of Administration, and with me today is Jeff Haig, Administrator of Purchasing Division.
Right. This is new for me. I mean, in my experience, we haven't done this before, and it raises a lot of questions for me because I don't mean this in a pejorative way, but it kind of supersedes or goes around our typical process. And for me to feel confident, feel good about that, I need a really good record as to why it is in the best interest of the state to do it this way, to join with Clark County and state of Texas. And part of my questions will be, do we still maintain control and discretion associated with this contract? So if you would take us through why we can't or are not doing this on our own, why we're joining the others, and why this is a better process and better interest of the state than going through our normal one, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Governor. Jeff Haig, for the record, Administrator of State Purchasing. Appreciate those questions. I'll take the agenda items independently, but would like to just provide some historical context as it relates to joinder agreements and cooperative contractings within the state. So these agreements before you and the contracting method that we're presenting is not new. How we're highlighting them on the Board of Examiners agenda is new, and I think it's a very healthy progression of the state's contracting process. As identified by Director Wells, we have several tools in our contracting toolboxes provided by NRS 333 and 332. And in my opinion, we have a responsibility in purchasing to evaluate all of those tools in the toolbox and make the right diagnosis based on the subject matter that we're procuring. So as it relates to the two contracts before you, the first of them with Gartner Consulting, don't know if you're familiar with Gartner or not, but they are a largely proprietary global research entity that provides several pillars of both research and analytical support around procurement and IT methodology. They also have an on-site consulting arm that will deploy physical resources across the country to support in projects just like our ERP project here in Nevada. We also have several state agencies who historically have taken advantage of Gartner's research arm, which is largely an online service with access to some over-the-phone analysts. And all of those agreements historically have been executed off of these joinder agreements, if you will, off of either a master agreement that was executed out of Clark County, which is the case here for the $218 work order, or there's another contract that was executed by the City of Las Vegas that's more specific to research. And so historically we've been executing those work orders, joinder agreements off of those Las Vegas or Clark County agreements. It's my understanding in the time that I've been at State Purchasing, we've never pursued our own master service agreement with Gartner. We are now doing that. We're in the final stages of negotiating our own master service agreement with Gartner. Future work orders, whether it be to support the ERP project, and what's before you today is the first of 4 work streams, and I'll be happy to detail those for you. But in the future, we hope to execute work orders off of the state's master service agreement with Gartner. And so that master service agreement will come before this board for approval. But by design of our contracting process, future work orders would not be executed off of that. So I see that as a little bit of cleanup, bringing that master service agreement within the state of Nevada under our own terms and conditions, and allowing us to execute work orders off of that. Now, in saying that, there was a high level of scrutiny that was done over the Clark County agreement as it relates to this ERP standard. There was a review done by our staff in state purchasing along with the Attorney General's office to ensure that the terms and conditions in the Clark County agreement are in line with our own terms and conditions. As you know, were just revised and approved by this body in February of this year. And that review concluded that they were. We also did a review to ensure that the Clark County agreement was procured in a way that was in line with our own procurement code as identified within 333 and 332, and it was. And so there was a high level of confidence by all those who played a part in reviewing these, that these were legal documents, that the state is protected under these documents and the terms included within them, and that we do have legal authority under 332 to join on to this contract. And so as a result of that total evaluation, giving the timing of the project, the ERP project, and where we are in that and where we know we need to be in the short term, I did feel like this was the right method for the state in our best interest to continue through with this project, being mindful that we were going to do a higher level of due diligence by bringing this MSA with Gartner in state and bringing that before this body.
No, thank you, and that is a good explanation. So essentially, at least this first one is a bridge until we can get to our own MSA.
As it relates to Gartner, that's correct.
Okay. Board members, any questions with regard to agenda item 7A?
No, Governor, thank you for your questions.
All right, let's move to 7B then.
So agenda item 7B is a contract with Periscope Holdings, Inc. for an off-the-shelf e-procurement system. This e-procurement system is a statewide implementation. It will provide procurement automation and contract management for state agencies, and local government will have the ability to participate within this system at no additional cost. Over the last year and a half, state purchasing has done an exhaustive research, meeting with vendors, understanding what e-procurement vendors are available, what features and functionality they could bring to the state, what their experience is within the government space specifically, because I feel strongly that our procurement methodology is different, and the vendors that we align ourselves need to be mindful of that and have a demonstrated competence in being successful within government. We are also very purposeful out of the gate to be mindful of the fact that our procurement process today is 100% manual, both by state agencies and local government across the state, and that whatever technology initiative we chose would be available to all and would provide technology support to everybody. At the conclusion of our vendor demonstrations and engaging with the vendor community within the e-procurement space, we began to do an in-depth analysis of what contracting vehicles were available for this, understanding that we have the ability to do our own RFP based on our procurement code identified within 333, but also wanting to view and evaluate other tools in our toolbox as it relates to cooperative contracting opportunities, joinders, or interlocals, all legal contracting opportunities as identified in statute. And understanding specifically what we were looking for, not to customize the product, but to take a best-in-class e-procurement system that was cost-effective, that would provide automation to all state agencies, that would also provide automation to local government at no additional charge. We derived at what is really a cooperative contract out of the state of Texas. And this gets a little bit tricky. As identified by Director Wells, and this is correct, this could also be viewed and defined under the joinder language in 332 because it is derived from the state of Texas. However, different than the Gartner agreement to some extent, the Texas DIR is a cooperative contracting arm that is a government entity. But all of their contracts are procured in a way with an expectation of they will be utilized by multiple government agencies, not just agencies within the state of Texas. And so those cooperative contracting opportunities, you may be more familiar with an organization that we're heavily vested in here in Nevada, referred to as NASPO Value Point. That is a cooperative contracting arm, but it is managed by a nonprofit organization, a little bit different than when that cooperative is ran by a government entity. Higher level of integrity in the solicitation process when it's run by a government entity, more in line with our procurement laws here in the state of Nevada. And after doing the in-depth analysis and validating that the Texas DIR cooperative contract from Periscope provided the best solution at the best cost with the best terms for the state. Here's the differentiator with the Periscope agreement. This contract, although executed off of a work order to get the technology from DIR, the contract that supports it, I don't think it's part of this manual, but we can certainly send it over, is executed off of our standard contract form that was approved by this body in February. So the state's full terms and conditions were leveraged in this agreement. We're purely just getting an off-the-shelf technology product, no customization. We will configure it to the laws, procurement laws of Nevada, but we were purposeful in procuring that best-in-class service from a provider. We didn't want to configure it to the way that we do business. We really want to make sure that we're leveraging the best procurement strategies that are in place in government and private sector, and that's what Periscope brings to this state. And so based on what we were looking for in the technology and the evaluation that we did, we felt that this cooperative contract with Texas DIR allowed us to impose our terms and conditions, leverage the best cost possible, both in hard dollars and resources in running the procurement, and get us a solution for the next couple of years that's going to provide us some great automation, some great business intelligence that we haven't had historically, and allow us to be more informed as we continue to move through a new procurement environment in the state.
Well, thank you, Mr. Hagan. That was very thorough. No, and I imagine you had anticipated some of these questions. I just want to be comfortable as we move forward. So in terms of process and protection and on those issues, I'm very comfortable. But one thing that's interesting that you said is that we're doing all our purchasing manually now?
Yes, Governor. The procurement function has been completely manual since our inception, I would assume. I'm not privy to really any automation that the office has had either in the interim or for the long term. So this is very, very needed.
Using carbon paper as well?
We do have some really nice 3-color, white, yellow, pink paper. No, we've tried to get away from those, but they're still around.
Wow. So, I guess last question again in terms of process. Do you see going outside our normal process as something we're going to do more often, or are these pretty much isolated situations?
Governor, based on my short tenure in state purchasing, I would say that it's very common for us to go outside our normal process. These cooperative contracts are the majority of our contract portfolios that we have today. I would say, on the contrary, as a result of this e-procurement project and part of the scope of this contract, we're having a consultant come in and align with our team members in purchasing to evaluate our contract portfolio, to ensure that our contracting strategy of the past, which was largely leveraged on cooperative contracts, joinder agreements, it is the right recipe for the state of Nevada, and that we're getting the best terms and conditions and pricing as a result of that strategy, because I'm personally not convinced that it is. So what I can tell you moving forward is that we are going through a much more thoughtful, documented process to evaluate what the right procurement strategy is based on the needs of the agency or the state that we're meeting. I will say that as it relates to individual procurements for state agencies, a particular agency we do run our RFP process as defined by 333, and that works really well. As it relates to those, what I'll call good of the state contracts that represent more of a statewide need, both at the executive level and the local government level, we are 100% leveraged in cooperative contracts, 100%. And again, I'm not convinced that that's the best strategy moving forward. So as a result of adopting this automation, which will give us the business intelligence we need to make informed decisions, we're going to evaluate those portfolios and make sure that they're being procured in the right way. I think what I'd like the opportunity to do, and I'm thankful to Director Wells for creating this on the BOE agenda, is educating you all on what procurement strategy we followed and why, and providing the supporting documentation in this binder prior to BOE to give you a high level of confidence of what we did and why we did it. Because as I view this, you know, again, we have several tools in our toolbox, and we need to thoughtfully evaluate all of those, but we have to document what we did and why and be ready to defend that. And we haven't done the best job of that historically, but we will moving forward.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Hagan, and getting us into the 21st century, and that's a good thing. Getting out of our comfort zone in terms of the status quo and exploring these new possibilities, making us more efficient, and finally saving taxpayer money. And so to me, it's a win-win-win-win all the way around. So I appreciate your being here and providing the explanation in the background. Board members, any questions or comments with regard to agenda item number 7?
Governor, this is Barbara Zagowski, and I do on number 6 on my copy on page, I think it's one of the two. I just wanted, if you could verify for me, it talks about the system training and the services. I just wondered how many are you having trained? And then we also have the travel expenses. Is that for the company to come to Nevada to train here? Are we traveling at all? Are staff traveling at all? And I just wondered who it was for, the state or the contractor, for their travel expenses. And then the consulting fees were $170. But the other thing that I was looking at is change orders not to exceed $100,000. But if you could just tell me how many are going to be trained, and I appreciate everything you're doing. I know that this is not easy. But if you could just tell me how many are being trained within the state. I assume it's all just state employees that work under you that are being trained. And then the travel expenses are for the company, and then the change orders not to exceed. And is there an anticipation of change order that would happen? And then the consulting services, if you could just mention those, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary, for the questions. Jeff Haig for the record. Just to ensure I'm referencing the correct contract, you're referring to the Periscope agreement. Is that correct?
Correct. I'm sorry, yes.
Great.
That's
So training will be in-depth and come in various forms. So currently, state purchasing facilitates the state certified contract managers training course. I'm sure you're familiar with. We have over 1,000 certified contract managers within that listserv. We will be reaching out to those folks initially, but we will also be reaching out to all state agencies at the director level office to designate purchasing folks within their organizations that will play a stakeholder role in the training and development of the state's e-procurement system. There will also be online training modules that will be available from the vendor that folks will have the ability to go on and access as needed, and then there will be training opportunities available through the solution on an ongoing basis as well. To your point, there are travel expenses incorporated within this contract. Those travel dollars are identified specifically for the vendor to come to Carson City and conduct in-person training, both on the technology solution, but the utilization of that solution. And that training by the vendor will be leveraged both by state purchasing staff, but they'll also be available for state staff as training is done, both for executive branch agencies and local government as well. The contracting dollars, Madam Secretary, that you that you noticed, that was referenced in my earlier comments to the governor. Those contracting dollars specifically will be used to evaluate the state's current good of the state contract portfolio, to do an analysis on those and a benchmarking study on what pricing and terms we've been able to achieve here in Nevada and how they relate to other public and private sector contracts with like industries and vendors across the country.
Thank you so much for answering my question. Pardon?
There's one more question I'm forgetting.
All right, you're good. You're good. You're remembering better than I am.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Board members, any other questions or comments with regard to agenda item number 7?
No questions here, Governor.
All right, thank you. If there are no questions, the chair will accept a motion to approve for approval to join or use other government's contracts as presented in agenda item 7A and B. One
Move to approve.
$218,000 and the second the amount of $1,750,000. I hear the Attorney General has moved for approval. Madam Secretary, is there a second?
There is a second. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any questions or discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 3-0. Thank you very much. And we'll move on to agenda item number 8, leases. Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Governor. There are 7 leases in agenda item number 8 for approval by the board this morning, and no additional information has been requested from any of the members.
Okay, I have no questions. Board members, any questions with regard to agenda item number 8?
No questions, Governor. Thank you.
If there are no questions, the chair will accept a motion to approve leases 1 through 7 as presented in agenda item number 8.
So moved.
Secretary of State has moved for approval. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by the Attorney General. Any questions or discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 3-0. We'll move on to agenda item number 9, contracts. Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Governor. There are 23 contracts in agenda item number 9 for approval by the board this morning, and members have requested additional information on the following. Contract number 1 between the Office of the Attorney General and Adams Natural Resources Consulting Services, LLC, and contract number 2 between the Department of Administration Public Works Division and Q&D Construction, Inc. I'd like to note on number 2 that the total amount of the contract has been revised to $47,281,540 after the bids were opened by the Public Works Division.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. And I had asked for both of these. I see that Ms. Adams is present. Would you come forward, please?
Hello, Governor. It's Bryn Gibson from the Attorney General's office. I'm here on the extension of Adams Resources contract for Yucca Mountain.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Gibson. Marta, good morning. It's nice to see you again.
Good morning, Governor. Good morning, General Laxalt and Secretary Sagavsky. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Ms. Adams, there's been a lot going on in a short period of time, and I'm hopeful that you can give us perhaps a brief overview of what has happened and obviously your participation in that, and as we move forward with regard to the federal budget and the amount that was put in there with regard to Yucca Mountain, how you feel where we are and where we're going.
Thank you, Governor. Again, for the record, Marta Adams. I would say that the state of Nevada is in sort of a heightened state of vigilance at the moment. As you know, the administration's proposal remains a proposed budget item, so we don't know exactly how that's going to be funded, if at all, or at what rate, whether it will occur as early as September or October, or if we're looking at a continuing resolution. So Bob Halstead, who unfortunately cannot be here, and I want to recognize also Belinda Suey for the Deputy Attorney General for the Attorney General's Office, and Susan Lynch, Technical Programs Administrator for the agency. Joe Strolin broke his leg over the weekend, so that was unfortunate. We have what we call 3 L's that make a sort of a triangular approach to the Yucca Mountain program, and Nevada's part in it. The first is legislation, so that would include the administration's budget, and again, there's $120 million proposed to restart the are a variety of bills pending in both houses of Congress. There is a bit of a disconnect between the House of Representatives and the Senate. In the House, we have John Shimkus, the chairman of the subcommittee on energy and I think it's energy and the economy, but I'm drawing a little bit of a blank there, that did in an earlier iteration present real challenges to the state's administration of our water law, as well as potentially interfere with our administration of air permits and various environmental permits. That bill, H.R. 3503, has been changed and is now headed to the larger House. It's out of committee. Meanwhile, in the Senate, there is an expected bill, although has not yet been introduced by Senators Alexander and Murkowski, to incorporate the provisions of the Blue Ribbon Commission, which, as you know, Governor, and that the cornerstone of the Blue Ribbon Commission is a consent-based process. Now, unfortunately, Nevada or Yucca Mountain is not encapsulated in the current proposal. However, there's another bill pending that has been introduced both by Senators Heller and Cortez Masto, called the Nuclear Waste Informed Consent Act, and I believe that's S95. That would extend the right of consent to Nevada as well as the 49 other states. So that's one prong of what we are very closely watching. The second is the litigation front. And we do have essentially 5 cases pending, and recently in a very productive strategy session looked at those and do have some proposals yet to come to you and the Attorney General. And then finally, the last prong, and perhaps the most expensive, is the NRC licensing adjudication. And as you will recall, the NRC, due to budget issues, basically suspended the adjudication. Then in August of 2013, the District of Columbia Circuit Court of Appeals said, no, NRC, you cannot do that. You've got to spend out your existing funding, which the NRC essentially has done in pre-adjudicatory activities. So we are gearing up on all 3 of those fronts, and I believe we're as ready as we can possibly be. You know, there is an interest in maintaining continuity. For many of us have worked on this project for decades, and we want to kill it. We're trying, but obviously cannot just do it unilaterally. I hope that sort of gives you a picture of what we're looking at.
No, thank you, Ms. Adams. And I was going to ask you the question, how many years have you been working on
Since
this?
1998, so I'm coming up on my 20th year.
So you, as much as anybody, have, or as close to this, that can be with regard to those 3 L's. So do you feel, I do, but I want it from you because you're closer to it. I feel like we're in as good or better position than we've ever been, given what's going on right now? In good or better position in terms of killing this once and for all?
What I would say is, excuse me again, Marta Adams for the record, we, among all the parties to the NRC licensing, have been basically preparing all along for the eventuality of a restart. And our experts are ready. We're preparing to meet the requirements for the database that NRC operates. We've got a number of prongs that we're working on there. I would say yes, we are in good shape. Unfortunately, some of the legislation pending would short circuit Nevada's ability to really present our case in front of the NRC. And that's really why we're revisiting the litigation to see where we might find be more productive with some of it. But yes, I do believe we're prepared. We're as prepared as we can be, and we completely appreciate all the support we've had from you, the Attorney General, the Secretary of State, as well as the legislature.
Yeah. No, and what you just mentioned is one of many issues that's very frustrating for me. When I was Attorney General, I feel like we've had this conversation.
Right, many times.
Beyond that, we've identified many flaws with regard to that project, and now some of this proposed legislation would seek an end around some of those technical problems that would have been fatal to the project, in my humble opinion. Right. And now, rather than a scientific approach in terms of determining whether it is sufficient to be able to geologically isolate the waste and have the water, et cetera, that there's been a recognition by the federal government of those deficiencies, and now they are seeking, as I said, to legislate around that. Is that a proper description of what's going on?
I believe it is, Governor. In fact, in the earlier iteration of Representative Shimkus's bill, there was a clear attempt to usurp the state engineer's authority under our water statutes, as well as other issues. Now, I believe, and obviously we're not privy to some of the inner workings of the committee, but it appears that some of the western states found those provisions problematic, understandably, because we've had a system where the western states do administer water. The legislation now has backed off those parts of what we had very large concerns over, but have raised the waste limit for Yucca Mountain from 70,000 metric tons to 110, and that's hugely problematic for us. The Senate, however...
Let me interrupt you for a second. When
me.
you say that it's extremely problematic, obviously it's problematic because it would go from 70,000 to 110,000. Is that what you mean when it's extremely problematic?
Yes, and the capability of the mountain itself, which is not appropriate on many levels. It simply cannot accommodate that.
And we don't have to get too hyper-technical, but when you say accommodate it, I mean, I've always said that it is a porous volcano that sits on an earthquake fault above an aquifer. And,
absolutely.
It's woefully deficient, and there's a reason why they propose to put those titanium shields, because they know that moisture will come through that mountain in a matter of decades. Absolutely. And would contaminate those casks that would be in there. And as I said, we have been talking about this, and you have been talking about this for 20 plus years. And now here we are again. And as I said, I feel like it is a disgusting waste of money and resources on behalf of the federal government to try to work to basically fit a round peg into a square hole, because that site cannot geologically isolate that waste with regard to all the other issues. And now here we are again, having the same conversation, but now having to fight legislation that essentially takes some of our tools out of our toolbox in order to fight the project, because they're just going to put a rubber stamp on it, or try to put a rubber stamp on it through legislation.
I think we're small, but we're mighty, and worried, but also optimistic that we have a very strong case. I would also add that the Senate, the United States Senate, seems more receptive to interim storage proposals. And that for us would be very significant to take the pressure off Yucca Mountain. There's quite a bit of misunderstanding about what is actually at the Yucca Mountain site. And there's not a facility. The boring machine, it's long gone. It's going to take certainly the Department of Energy quite an effort to gear up, even if funding is made available. And similarly, the NRC is not as ready as they say they are. So we've been preparing all along. We're not going to go away, and we're not going to give up.
No,
So,
I appreciate that, Ms. Adams, because
so.
we have to do that, and it's a 5-mile horseshoe hole in the ground right
That's
now.
it. That's it. There's no emplacement tunnels, none of that.
And last thing I have, and I'm sure the other board members have any questions, but you mentioned interim storage, and there was a comment by the Secretary of Energy with regard to interim storage out there that I think has been sufficiently pulled back or withdrawn.
I believe, right.
But I don't know if you have any comments with regard to that, but as bad of an idea as Yucca Mountain is, this one's worse. To take the same waste stream and put it in an interim storage base above ground somewhere out there at the national security site. So any comments with regard to that?
Governor, the only comments I would make on that is the law as it's presently configured does not accommodate that. As you know, at Area 5, the state of Nevada is certainly doing its share of receiving low-level, mixed-level waste that is currently under permit by the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection. I think Secretary Perry did have to walk back that, but that's problematic as well for different technical reasons. But certainly the law doesn't allow it, at least at the moment. So.
No, and that's the thing. Not only is it illegal, but it's more dangerous, correct? I mean,
it's, I just can't imagine, and the legacy that Nevada has at the Nevada test site now, the NNSS, is nothing short of concerning. So I would say that we've done our share and certainly should not be identified for that as well. At least I don't think so.
And then final question, I apologize, but do you feel like we have provided the team with sufficient resources to engage in this fight in a meaningful way?
Again, Marta Adams for the record. Yes, I do, Governor, and the legislature was extremely supportive of us in this last session, basically saying if licensing does gear up faster than we anticipate it will, that we will be welcomed by the Interim Finance Committee. So yes, I believe we do have resources. The NRC process, we don't know what it's going to look like if there's 3 simultaneous licensing boards, if the bulk of the activity occurs in the Washington, D.C. area, that will cause us quite a bit of expense. So we'll have to see how the NRC handles that.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. Questions or comments from the other board members?
Governor, this is Barbara Sagowski. I don't know if Bryn has anything or not, but I just wanted to, number one, thank you and the Attorney General's office for all the work that you're doing on behalf of the citizens to keep us safe. And I am full-heartedly in opposition to the high waste coming here. So thank you for what you're doing. And Ms. Adams, thank you for the consulting services that you provide and the information that you have. It's very refreshing to hear this conversation over and over again, and I just wish it would stop in D.C. But thank you.
And thank you.
Mr. Attorney General, any questions or comments?
No questions, Governor. Thank you. Thank you, Marta. Appreciate it. Thanks for testifying.
Thank you, General. Appreciate your support.
All right, Marta, thank you.
Thank you.
We fight, right?
Yeah, we fight on. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, then we'll move on to contract number 2, which is Department of Administration, State Public Works, and Q&D and Construction. Kat, if you would come forward as well, please. Maybe Gus, you as well. Thank you. All right, my purpose for calling this one forward is this is something that we've waited a very long time for, and it was something that was very important to me, and I know it's important to our veteran community. Kat, perhaps you could, Ms. Miller, excuse me, Director Miller, could lay a record and foundation of where we were and what you expect, and then we can talk a little bit about the technical details associated with construction of the Veterans Home.
Good morning, sir, and members of the Board of Examiners. My name is Director Kat Miller, Director of Nevada Department of Veteran Services. For the last almost 20 years, veterans in the state of Nevada have been pushing to have a skilled nursing facility, a state veterans home in northern Nevada. We have one in southern Nevada. It is at capacity. In northern Nevada, we have veterans having to travel hundreds of miles away from home for this service when they need it at the time that they should be around their family, the time they need them the most. In 2006, the state was approved for a grant for the VA for a 2/3 federal match, the state paying 1/3. But of course, this grant is contingent on funding. In 2013, Governor Sandoval introduced legislation in his budget to put a planning grant together for the new Northern Nevada Veterans Home, a 96-bed facility that would be built here in the Reno-Sparks area. In 2015, during the legislative session, the state made the 1/3 match, which was just over $14 million. With that match, we were able to move from a position of about 112 to where we are today, number 50 on the priority list for being funded. Because our state is smaller than some other states and has less bed need, we don't move as quickly on the list as some other states do. Again, we have moved from 112 to where we are today in 50, and that is solely because the state came up with the 1/3 match. Had that 1/3 match not been made, we would not have been competitive. We would have not have been where we are today. But again, it could have been a year to 5 years. It's really hard to say when the federal appropriation would have come in to hit our point on the priority list, because every year that changes. New states will come in with new projects. States may come off of the list. And every day that goes by is a day a veteran is not getting the care that they need close to family. And on top of that, with inflation, the costs were going up to build this new Northern Nevada Veterans Home. So this year in our budget, we went forward to fund up front the cost of the home. I did want to state, because I've been asked several times, if we build the home up front, would the VA still reimburse their 2/3? They have been very clear. According to the VA, if Nevada will still receive federal funding if we elect to start the project in advance of receiving federal funding. They have been very clear at this from the beginning. So, sir, and other members, Madam Secretary, Attorney General, if there are other questions, that concludes my overview.
Yeah. Thank you, Director Miller. And my only question for you, and then we'll go on to the construction phase of this, is where does that put us on the list since we've fronted the money? What is the likelihood and the time period within which we will get reimbursed for that match?
Again, this is Director Kat Miller, Director of Veteran Services, State of Nevada. Sir, as mentioned, we're number 50 right now. Last year, the list is reposted every year. We were number 62 prior to this next list coming out. In order for us to be funded for the VA right now, the VA would have to put over $300 million into the appropriation. Congress would have to approve over $300 million. Right now, we're anticipating $90 million going into the budget for next year. So we know some projects are falling off in California. We know some other projects are coming on. My and this is a guess, sir, and this is an estimate, would be 3 to 5 years. But again, it could be much sooner. We have asked the VA to look at some language that would put more rural states on a more even footing with other states. The good news is they are introducing that language that would change that prioritization. Whether it gets approved or not, I don't know. I know our congressional delegation is pushing really hard to make the rules a little more fair for everyone involved. Would that happen? It would be sooner. But right now, my best guess is 3 to 5 years. And again, that is simply an estimate because we don't know what other states will pull their projects off, will put new projects in.
No, and thank you. And I think it begs the next question, which is, had we not done this, it would be longer than even that, than the 3 to 5 years. It likely would have pushed us, I don't know how much further back, but we would not have moved up the list. So it's, in terms of reimbursement, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when.
Correct, sir. It is not a question of if. It is a question of when. The VA has been very clear. We remain on the list, and once the amount of appropriation comes that hits our level on the prioritization list, we will be reimbursed.
Thank you. I'm not sure, Gus, or who's going to make the presentation in terms of construction, and I think we're using the CMAR process, and if you would take us through that, sir. If you turn your microphone on.
Thank you, Governor. For the record, Gus Nunez, I'm the Administrator for Public Works, and with respect to the process that was followed, I'll let Chris Schmitz, Deputy Director, Administrator, do that. What I'd like to do from my perspective, I think funding this project at this time by the state is extremely wise. We're going to and if we don't get the federal, in the next, right now we're experiencing between 5 and 10% inflation per year. I think that within the next few years, this project could be 20, 30, 40% in 3 to 5 years. So we're saving a lot of money right now by proceeding ahead at this time and avoiding all of that inflation and maybe even losing the project if funding were not to increase in 3 to 5 years from now. So I think this is an extremely wise idea to go ahead and move forward at this time. That concludes my comments. I think I'll let Chris take care of the technical comments on the CMAR process. Thank you, Governor.
Hello, Governor and members of the board. Chris Schmitz, Deputy Administrator. Just a brief recap of our involvement with the process. We hired Van Wart Bugatti, Architects of Reno, to start drawing the project, designing it. And approximately 3 years ago, we advertised for a construction manager at risk, which is the delivery method that we elected to use for this project because of its size and complexity. We received 8 responses and then shortlisted to 3 local firms in Reno. When we finished, we did select Q&D based on the structure that's delineated in NRS 341. And so we moved forward with Q&D construction and started the process of having input from them, as is done with the CMAR delivery method. We did come to an approximate 102,000 square foot facility that does include 96 beds. The GMP that's in the contract before you is for $47.2 million. That does include a $700,000 owner's contingency, money that we have at our disposal to use inside that or not. There were additive alternates that we were able to afford a couple of them and put them in, and there's a couple that we were not able to afford. And as Director Miller mentioned, there is a little more than $33 million that's reimbursable from the federal government once we complete the vet's home in accordance with their standards, which we intend to do. As far as scheduling, we plan on starting construction. Well, there would be a groundbreaking on July 17th, and then within a week after that or so, we would start construction in earnest, and then complete it by the end of the year before your term is completed.
Word gets around, huh?
Yes.
But you do anticipate completion by the end of next year?
Yes, sir. That was made abundantly clear to us.
And with regard to the CMAR process, you don't anticipate or can the contractor come back, given inflation and such, and seek more money for the project? Or are they pretty much locked into this $47 million figure?
No, sir, they locked themselves in. They signed that agreement. They're done.
No, I know that. I just want to make sure it's clear on the record as well. And you're confident. I mean, I have great respect and confidence in Q&D, but I also know in my role on the transportation board and having observations with regard to a lot of projects they have, that they have the bandwidth to get this done on time.
Chris Simmons for the record. Yes, we've since we opened bids, our staff, we've spent a great deal of time with their staff, and they have 5 people that are office staff dedicated to this job and ready to go, and then there's 4 people that report to Q&D directly who are also slated for this job. So there's 9 people at Q&D Construction that are standing by ready for the notice to proceed. So they're adequately staffed, and then there's the subs that Q&D has for the project are largely all Northern Nevada firms, and they've got the resources committed and set aside so that we make our commitment to finish by the end of 2018.
Well, and it's for the veterans' sake, and I guess this is a little bit of editorial, but this is a project whose time has come. The veterans deserve it. They need it, and as Mr. Nunez said, if we don't do it now, it's likely we won't be able to afford to do it. And I personally want to thank the legislature for supporting the proposal to get this funded, regardless of our position on the list. As I said, I'm excited about it. I have been around a lot of veterans organizations and veterans themselves, and this is a really big deal for this community and for this state. And as Kat was talking about, I mean, for me to have a loved one who's a veteran to have to go hundreds of miles away in order to get this type of care, rather than being home, in their hometown around family, and have that support, is just unacceptable. So I appreciate the sense of urgency in getting this done, and I look forward to July 17th and the groundbreaking, and then, as you said, within a week to 10 days, actually starting to really do the work in earnest and watching it go up. But thank you for that.
You're welcome.
All right, Madam Secretary, Mr. Attorney General, any questions or comments?
I have a comment, Barbara Sakowski, and thank you, Governor. And I got almost all my questions answered. I want to know the square footage, want to know the beds, and you gave me all of that, so I really appreciate that. I just wanted to know, Director Miller and others, if you can tell me, have we looked at some of the errors of our way, so to speak, of what we designed and what we did in Las Vegas, or I should say Boulder City, and learned from that, we're able to bring to this new facility. I, along with the Governor and the Attorney General, am very, very grateful, and know that all of the veterans are extremely happy about this decision. And yes, the Governor's right. This is something that is long overdue, number one, but we do need to make sure that family members are close to their families. But could you just tell me a little bit about that? Because I'm just curious. I know that we have some issues with the Veterans Home in Boulder City, so I just wanted to make sure that we touched on that.
Madam Secretary, this is Kat Miller for the record. I think I understood your question to be, have we taken a look at lessons learned at the Boulder City facility and design of the new facility? Did I catch that?
Yes, you did.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, absolutely. We have learned so much from operating the home in Boulder City, but it's not just lessons learned from our facility. This facility is an absolute state-of-the-art facility. We have been working very closely with the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, with our partners in other states. Some of the differences between the Northern Nevada and the Southern Nevada facility include these will be single bed units. It's designed in a way so it's much more home-like. It's also more ergonomic for the staff. Although you won't feel the staff presence in the same way that you do in the Southern Nevada, simply because of the design. The backbone in terms of the IT architecture reduces some of the manpower requirements while still allowing us to do all of the things we need to do to provide the quality of care expected at a home like this. It's also built around a community hub that will invite and bring in members of the community. There's a parade ground, for example. There's no real place in the Reno-Sparks area where veterans can gather. Our veterans in the homes can't go out in the same way as, well, you would imagine. They're in a skilled nursing facility. This brings the community to them. There's some spaces for veteran service organizations to meet. There's everything that they could need to not only make sure that they have the quality of care that they need, but the quality of life that they need. And I'm really excited about it. I would love to take my plans and travel to wherever you are to give you a more in-depth brief, or anybody that would like to see them. You'd be proud of the job that was done by the architect and by State Public Works, Mr. Ron Crook specifically, who's the project manager, to make sure that this is the finest home in the nation.
Well, just to let you know, I am very proud of everything that you're doing, Director Miller, because I've been to several of the functions you've had down in Boulder City, and if that's any indication what's going to happen up north, the veterans are very well taken care of. So thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Attorney General, are you still with us?
I am, Governor. Thank you.
Okay.
No questions.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, and best of luck, and we'll see you in a week or so. Yeah. Thank you. All right. I don't have any other contracts that I've held with regard to agenda item number 9. Board members, any other contracts you'd like to be considered or presented?
No, Governor. Thank you.
With that, then, the chair will accept a motion to approve contracts 1 through 23 as presented in agenda item number 9.
Moved.
Secretary of State has moved for approval. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by the Attorney General. Any questions or comments on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously, 3-0. Thank you very much. All right, we'll move to agenda item number 10, Master Service Agreement. Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Governor. There is one master service agreement in agenda item 10 for approval by the board this morning, and no additional information was requested by any of the members.
I have no questions. Board members, any questions?
No questions.
Is there a motion for approval?
Move for approval.
Okay, Secretary.
I second.
Secretary of State has moved to approve the master service agreement presented in agenda item number 10. The Attorney General has seconded the motion. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 That motion passes 3-0. We'll move on to agenda item number 11, information item. Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Governor. There were 31 contracts under the $50,000 threshold that were approved by the clerk between May 24th and June 12th of 2017. This item is informational only, and no additional information was requested by any of the members.
Okay, board members, any questions with regard to agenda item number 11? All right, let's move to agenda item number 12, another information item. Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Governor. Item 12 includes 2 informational reports. The first is the available balances for the various contingency accounts that are managed by either the Board of Examiners or the Interim Finance Committee. As of June 9th, 2017, these balances include the appropriations to those accounts that were included in Assembly Bill 499, which was signed on June 8th and was effective upon passage and approval. These accounts will cover contingencies through the 2017-2019 biennium, and I think we are in really good shape. I think the balances there are where we would like to be coming out of the legislative session.
Thank you, Mr. Wells, and you anticipated my only question is that you were comfortable with those balances, and it sounds as if you are, so thank you. Board members, any questions with regard to agenda item number 12?
No, Governor.
All right then, let's move to agenda item number 13, which is public comment. Is there any member of the public present in Carson City that has public comment? I hear and see none. Is there any member of the public present in Las Vegas that would like to present public comment?
There is none, Governor.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Attorney General has moved to adjourn. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by the Secretary of State. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 That motion passes 3-0. This meeting's adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.